Hello and welcome to week 7 in behavior management. And here we are. Now we've covered the A's, covered the B's, and now we're going to start talking about consequences. Now, first off, we have to recognize that the word consequence has sort of a negative connotation to it. Like careful or there will be consequences, those kinds of things. But we have to recognize that consequence simply means what is going to happen right after the behavior. That, whatever that is, if it has an effect on the frequency of the behavior. If I do a behavior and a siren goes by and it doesn't affect the behavior at all, then it's not part of the ABC. We're looking at the C's that exist or the C's that we implement in a way that we impact or we affect the behavior. There are two categories of that. First is reinforcers, and the other one is punishment. We have to make sure that we get these terms very, very correct. So reinforcers and punishments. Now, we're going to look now at that law, the law of effect, one of the few laws in the field of psychology. So the law of effect says something, whatever it is, a stimulus, a sign, a feeling, whatever it is that occurs after the behavior, we call it a reinforcer if it increases or maintains the behavior that preceded it. There's nothing about anything in the world that makes something a reinforcer all the time. Money is not a reinforcer all the time. How much more money could you give Bill Gates, right? The definition of something being a reinforcer is based on its effect on the behavior that precedes it. So we'll call something a reinforcer if it increases the behavior or maintains it. A punishment, similar mentality, a punishment is anything that decreases or eliminates the behavior before it. So we have to be very, very scientific about this. We do not necessarily know that certain things are reinforcers, and we don't know if certain things are punishers. And I give an example, a very sad example of this in the course book. You would imagine that getting hit by a parent would be a punishment. Yet we know from research that children who have an abusive parent will sometimes engage in behavior that results in them getting hit. And the parent, following treatment, will say, why do they do X, Y, and Z when they know that's going to make me angry and whatnot? Looking at the dynamics that exist within there. And what we recognize is that even though we think objectively that getting hit by a parent is a negative experience or a painful, awful experience, and therefore very unlikely to support the behavior before it, in these cases, the hitting from the parent is actually interpreted as a reinforcer. The sad reality is that individual, the child, is acting in a way to get the attention of their parent. Now, that attention may be very painful, but the reinforcing quality of getting any sort of recognition that you exist from the parent is a reinforcer enough to maintain that behavior, and it overpowers the punishing quality of it. So we see in that example how important it is. We don't call anything a reinforcer until we have evidence that it's actually increasing the behavior, and we don't call anything a punishment until it actually decreases or eliminates the behavior. So the law of effect is that in the presence of reinforcers, behavior will be increased and maintained. In the presence of punishments, behavior will be decreased or eliminated. So we have that piece right there. The next terminology I want to get into are the words positive and negative. And I make this mistake all the time. I just made it a while ago. Positive and negative usually refer to the, we'll say something's positive because it's joyful, something's negative because it's sad or, not pleasant. In the terminology of behavior management, positive and negative is more like the math symbols, addition and subtraction. We'll call something positive when it's added. We'll call something negative when it's taken away. This is very similar to the way we identify symptomology, let's say in the condition of schizophrenia. There are positive and negative symptoms. They're not talking about pleasant and unpleasant. What they're talking about are symptoms such as illusions, hallucinations, and delusions that are added to the person's experience, and maybe flat affect or the inability to have emotions as something that is taken away or a negative symptom. So you have positive and negative symptoms. We've added, taken away. We need to have that mentality when we're talking about positive and negative reinforcers and punishments. It's not talking about pleasant, because you can have a positive punishment. When you add something, you can have a negative punishment, taking something away. You can have positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. But it has to do with adding something or taking away. That's the second kind of terminology there. The other thing to remember in terms of the law of effect is when there is a behavior that's occurring in the world, you're looking at a student, you're looking at your own behavior, you're looking at, and why is this person doing it? The law of effect says something is reinforcing. Now, it might be something outside, it might actually be something internal. Person could be self-reinforcing. But there is always something that's reinforcing. So let's first talk about reinforcement, and then we'll talk about punishment. Reinforcement. For each individual person, a reinforcement is individual. What you find pleasant, what you want, your desires, and all that are totally yours. I'll give you an example of that. Years ago, when my daughter was in elementary school, she was a very, very, very active reader of books, of chapter books, when she was in elementary school. Now, the elementary school had a contest over the summer. The person who read the most chapter books and documented them on log sheets they provided would be able to throw out the first pitch at a game at the Sea Dogs down in Portland. Well, we were all excited about this because we were pretty sure that my daughter was going to have the most books. So, as it turns out, we went to the event that was to celebrate the most books, and the winner was not my daughter. Now, that's perfectly okay with me, but the winner had read something like 20 books over the course of the summer. Now, I had my children part-time with me, and she read at least twice that much just on the every other weekend. That's like, what is going on? As it turns out, the school assumed that getting to throw the pitch out at the Sea Dogs game is something that children want. This is something that my relatively unathletic oldest daughter was terrified about. This was not something that she wanted to win. That was not going to be a good, pleasant experience for her. So, in her cleverness, she did two different logs. One log was the accurate log of almost 90 books that she read over the course of the summer. The other one was 10 books. That was the one she handed in. So the guessing that everybody would really like to be able to throw out the first pitch was a miss when it came to my daughter. And the teacher was very accommodating to this, did not change anything, and developed an award for Hannah specifically. And the person who had the second most books was the person who threw out the pitch, and nobody knew. Nobody knew. That person still thought they had the most, so that was fine. There was no competition or anything like that. So what we recognize is when we're developing an ABC contingency plan for someone, and we're looking for the things that reinforce them. What are the things the things that reinforce me may not be what is reinforcing to that individual. So we have a couple strategies here. I'm going to go through them here. First, you can sit down with the person and anybody who knows them, and you can brainstorm. What are the things they like to do? What are the things that they, gravitate to if they have free time and whatnot? You can ask other people, their friends, all of that stuff. And related to that free time, um, there's a trick called the Premack principle. The Premack principle is that observe the individual and what they do when they have nothing else to do. What do they do? Do they watch TV, play video games, stare at the wall, go for a walk, whatever it is? Whatever it is that they would self-select is a reinforcer. So you can use that. The other methodologies here, you can give individuals choices. You can have a menu of things that they do something, and then you can say, okay, you've now successfully done this activity. You get to choose from one of these three things. You can go for a walk, you can feed the dog, might be reinforcing, you can play a video game, you can play a game with dad. You can have those, and the person can choose one of those, the menu of things. Ultimately, harken back to what I said about we don't know what a reinforcer is. We don't know if a reinforcer is until it starts working. We may have to experiment. When we're working with kids or even working with ourselves, we might say, oh, I'm going to put this up. I'm going to say, this is the thing I'm going to reward myself with after I do this behavior. And then you're going along for a while and it's not working. You might have found out that the reinforcer is simply not enough to maintain that behavior. It doesn't mean that behavior management isn't working. Remember, there's a law involved here. Put the reinforcer there that will make someone do that, will be enough, and then we'll see. So I'll give you an example of when I did that once with my children. I had one daughter, Mara, the youngest one, who, let's just say she didn't like to clean her room. And she would say, whenever we went up to her room, that she didn't know how. She didn't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. You go on, even though we'd show her and stuff like that. And it's like, and we put a point system. We had all that stuff. And then I said, okay, I'm going to, use some of this knowledge that I have here. And I went up to her. I would say she was maybe 8 or 9, right around the time that developmentally they should be able to start organizing things in categories. I mean, prior to that, you really shouldn't have any realistic expectations about children cleaning their room independently. But she was about 8 or 9 years old. She was ready to do this. And I said, I want you to go and clean your room. And I gave her a list of things to do that she didn't know how to do. And I said, when you're done this, I'm going to give you $30. Her eyes got big as saucers. $30. I said, yeah, I'll give you $30. And I had the 20 and the 10 right in my hand. And she went up, and I got to tell you, she cleaned that room. She was washing the windows. She was mopping the floor. She put everything away, blah, and she earned that $30. So two things happen. For one, with enough incentive, we'll do just about anything. Someone came up to you right now and said, if you get straight A's in behavior management this semester, I'll give you $1 million. Somewhere out there, there's a price, and you would dedicate yourself every day. You would engage in the behavior. That is the power of an incredibly large reward. Okay. I gave her a really large reward for $30 and she got the $30. What I also learned is, and what I was able to share with her, says, you know how to do all these things because you just did them. I kind of tricked her into demonstrating what she knew already. And so there we go. Remember what we said about, had we run into a problem with her not knowing how to do a particular skill, it would have revealed itself in there. If you don't know how to do something, doesn't matter what the incentive is, it's not gonna work for you. Okay, so let's insert our terms, positive and negative. So we have positive reinforcement and we have negative reinforcement. That means the stimulus, okay, is increasing the behavior because it's a reinforcer, increasing or maintaining the behavior. So you've either added something or you've taken something away, and the result is an increase or a maintaining of the behavior. The positive and negative refers to whether you've added something or subtracted something. So a positive reinforcer, this is the one that we know all the time. These are things like using praise or recognition or money or tokens or points or grades or anything. These are things that we add as soon as the behavior is done and done correctly. We add these things, and those are the source of our positive reinforcements. And what are negative reinforcements? The negative reinforcements are when we lose something that was irritating, okay? And it makes the behavior increase. So if I act in a certain way and something irritating goes away because of that behavior, I'm more likely to engage in that behavior. I'll give you a great example that you probably experience every day. You get into your car, you start it up, you start heading down the road, and you haven't put your seatbelt on, and the annoying sound starts going. Now, I know some people hook it behind them. That's unsafe. Don't do that. But here's this beeping sound, okay? And in my car, it goes for a while, then it stops, then it'll go for a while, and then it'll stop, that kind of thing. So it's extra irritating. And all I need to do is put my seatbelt on and it will go away. So to avoid hearing that sound, I put my seatbelt on right away. Your alarm clock is the same way. If you place your alarm clock across the room, much better than you snooze button addicts. It starts going off. There's no such thing as an alarm clock that says, hey, Mark, when you're ready, just get up. No, it's an irritating sound. It's supposed to be. And you get up out of bed and you shut it off or throw it across the room or whatever it is that you do. That behavior makes that go away. Getting out of jail for good behavior. There you go. I'm going to assume it's not pleasant in jail. And if I act in a certain way, I get out early. Awesome. Those are positive. That's a negative reinforcer. Now, there's a concept called the negative reinforcement loop that occurs sometimes when we're dealing with children's misbehavior, maybe sometimes with other people's misbehavior. So let me give you an example. You're at the store, and those crazy people that design the products that are at the checkout line, designed to attract your children's attention. So when you're surrounded by strangers, your kids will start asking for things, and you're sitting there going, no, no. And after a few no's, you start to look around, you start to think, I wonder if these people think I'm a bad, abusive, neglectful parent. And eventually, the nagging is so bad that you give in and you buy them the thing that they want. Now, what you've just engaged in is your child has successfully manipulated you. Your child has been giving you a negative stimulus. They're whining, the asking, all of this stuff. And you're just sitting there going, wow, I need this away from me. I need this to go. And you give in, and it reinforces that behavior. The next time they go, they're going to whine again. It's a great. And here's also what will happen sometimes in, let's say, in a classroom. You have a student in the classroom that's either overwhelmed, or they're tired, or they just don't want to be there, or maybe they're bored, kind of thing, and they start acting out. They're in a negative situation, and they start behaving in such a way that to get out of that situation, because they know the teacher who's trying to get things done, try and move the class along. There's this kid that keeps on acting out in the classroom. And so the situation is the child is trying to get out of a negative situation. And I want this kid out of my classroom so that I can go on and teach the way I want. So this is going to be a win-win. I turn to the student and I say, you need to go down to the office and you need to tell them I've sent you to the office because you're misbehaving in class, or whatever. At least that's what they did when I was a kid. And so what happens is you get this loop where you act in a certain way, and I'm going to respond in a certain way to remove that negative stimulus. And you've responded to remove the negative stimulus of being in the classroom. And it's a win-win, but it's not a very positive one. There, I use the word again. Not a very success-oriented one. That kind of thing. Okay, so I know there's a lot of data in this class. There's a lot of, in this particular chapter especially. Now, reinforcement, when we have a plan under these conditions, A, do this, and I'll just work with positive reinforcements right now. Positive reinforcement, but these apply to everything. Positive reinforcements. The most effective positive reinforcement is one that happens right after the behavior. The more time between the behavior and the reinforcer, the less that behavior is going to continue. These studies on how long can you go without giving a reinforcer and still maintain the behavior is what gives us the every other week paycheck. A series of studies done on how often do people need to get paid. Maybe every hour is a little extreme. Every day, maybe some people get paid every day. Some people get paid every week. Some people get paid every other week. Sometimes they get paid per month. Sometimes they get paid per year. But the most effective one, the balance point, is 2 weeks. Research has indicated that's about as far as you can go before paying someone, but still maintain that level of behavior. Now, corporations, a little bit of industrial psychology here, corporations like to hold on to that money. Places that have, thousands and thousands of employees, they can take that money, they put it in, it's your money, you've already ordered. They can put it into a very short-term savings account, earn some interest on it, and then pay you. So the longer they can hold on to what's yours and they gain interest from that, this is a win. This is a win for organizations. So there was motivation to find out, how far can we wait? Now, the schedule by which we get a reinforcer. Okay, I want to show you this table right here. These are called partial reinforcement schedules. Now, when you do a behavior and you get a reinforcer, and doing a behavior and get a reinforcer, and every time you do something, that tends to not support long-term behavior. And I'll tell you why. Because as soon as you miss one, it wrecks the whole system. When you're expecting it every time and then it doesn't work, you might try again, and then that's it. Something's broken. That's not what you want. You want to be able to maintain behavior over a very, very long period of time. So we start looking at schedules of reinforcement. That's where we get to this. There are schedules that are based on time. Those are interval schedules. And there are ratio. This is the number of reinforcers, the number of behaviors that need to occur in order to get a reinforcer. So when you have a fixed interval schedule, that means an exact amount of time passes between each reinforcement. So every hour, every 2 weeks, that's a fixed interval schedule. So your paycheck is a fixed interval schedule if you're getting paid every 2 weeks. There can be a variable interval schedule where the person doesn't know exactly how long they're going to have to engage in the behavior before you're going to get your reward. You can see the examples there: checking your email, winning a video game. You don't know how long you're going to have to play before you get there. Now, we're going to see that the fixed ones, just like the every time, the fixed ones are not necessarily the best way to reinforce a behavior over a long haul. The variable ones are a little bit stronger because you don't know when it's going to happen. So you're going to tend to maintain that behavior for a longer period of time. Look at the email example. How many times we check our email or check our messages or Instagram or whatever it is that we're using. Now, the ratio schedules, there's a fixed ratio, which is I do a certain amount of behavior, including one and a reinforcer, but I might have to do 5, and then I'm going to get my reinforcer. 5, and then I'm going to get my. This is like piecework. Let's say you're working in manufacturing, and you're going to get paid for every 5 units that you complete. That's a fixed interval schedule. Now they may pay you every year. They may take that and pay you every other week, but you have a combination of a fixed ratio and a fixed interval in terms of how you're going to get paid. Then you have the variable ratio, and this is reinforcement occurs in a varying number of responses. And that'd be playing the lottery or the number of shots to score a goal in a soccer game. But the best one to maintain behavior is the variable ratio. And you get this right here, you get the variable ratio here. This is the pattern of behaviors in terms of the cumulative number of responses over time. Here we have you see the fixed interval, the variable interval, the fixed ratio, and the variable ratio has the most consistent behaviors. And you'll see in my little text there, things like addictions to gambling. We don't know how many times, well, it's not even a lever now, not even a handle. It's a button. You go to the casino and you're at the slot machine. You don't know how many times you're going to have to press that. And the slot machines are based on a variable ratio win cycle. There's a computer that knows when things are going to win, but the setup is a variable ratio. So you're just going to go, it might be 10, might be 15, might be 100, might be the next one. That ratio of reinforcement is the most powerful. Okay, so the last part on reinforcement, okay, is when we are often in situations in which the behavior, which is existing within a constellation of choices of behaviors, depending on how much they can do, different circumstances that are going on, there might be all kinds of choices for that person to behave in a certain way, but we want them to pick that one instead of all the others. We call that differential reinforcement. Same as differential diagnosing. Based in differential diagnosing, we're eliminating all the others' possibilities in order to come to the solution. Think of that in a way that the person who's going to receive a reinforcer for the target behavior has to eliminate all the others and do the one. Now, differential reinforcement can be applied in different ways. We have DRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors. Now, these are someone can they can misbehave in a certain way, or they can choose to do something else. They can, instead of just calling out the answer, they can raise their hand. Now, the tricky part of that is they can actually call out the answer and raise their hand at the same time. Okay, so we might want to use a differential reinforcement of, incompatible behavior, which is the target behavior. You have the target behavior, then you have the more adaptive behavior. The target behavior is yelling out in class. The target behavior would be something that makes it impossible for them to yell out in class. Now, I'm going to have to get creative about this live on the air here. What could we do that would make it impossible for someone to yell out the answer? We want them to be able to do that. So maybe what we reinforce is they take their pencil, they put it in their mouth, and then write down what they were going to say. I'm making this up. Give me a break. So they put the pencil in their mouth. They can't, the stimulus, the A is there. I want to scream out the answer. Let's give them the choice. They have to put a pencil in their mouth and then raise their hand. See if that works. Incompatible behaviors. I want to give you a really good one on that. This is really, really fun. There was a student in one of my classes, this class, who was working in an elementary school, and they had a student who would sit in their chair and they would bounce the chair up and down throughout the class. I'm like, that's so irritating. It would just like pick up the chair and bounce on it. So she said they came up with a plan that they would reinforce. They got him a little ottoman, a little like footstool, and they put it under his desk. And they said, when you're sitting at your desk, put your feet up on the ottoman. And every time I look at you and your feet are up on the ottoman, I'm going to give you a point, or they get a star, or whatever it is, kind of thing. But get the cleverness of this. If you're sitting in a chair and you put your feet up on an ottoman, you cannot bounce your chair. It was impossible for the child to bounce the chair and keep their feet on the ottoman at the same time. So just a brilliant example of using differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. Now, the next one is DRL. What if you're getting too much of a good thing? What if you're Hermione Granger from Harry Potter and you're always answering the question? So we can design a reinforcement that you only do this a certain number of times. Hermione only gets the reward that we've set up if her behavior occurs 4 times or less. Or like maybe we don't want her to not participate 2 to 4 times. But if she does 5, she doesn't get the reinforcer. If she doesn't participate, she doesn't get the reinforcer. There's a band that we're looking for, so we can work that kind of thing out. And finally, even though we don't want to do this one very often, there is what's called a DRO, differential reinforcement of other, meaning do anything but this. This is the thou shalt not behavior plan. It's a last ditch effort. Do anything you want, just don't break things. That's it. But you can do anything you want. Now, here's this is how rules sometimes work. That differential reinforcement happens as long as you don't break the rules. In the practice of play therapy, one model of play therapy is you have a room full of toys, you have the therapist, kid comes in, very simple rules. You can't leave the room, can't break anything, and you can't hit the therapist. Aside from that, you can do whatever you want. So and then in the model of play therapy, you're reflecting every time the child does something. You're just saying, you're picking up the doll. You're making the doll walk across that ladder. You're going to, whatever, you're giving that constant reinforcement. As long as it's you can do anything you want except for those 3 rules. So it's kind of an example of how effectively using the thou shalt not or the list of rules or whatever. Okay. Long video here. Sorry about that. Punishment. Now, all of that about reinforcement, let's look at punishment. First off, another sort of general rule of thumb when it comes to behavior management, reinforcement works better than punishment. You get more bees with honey. That same sort of thing. Punishment is an effective tool. It is one of our, in our utility belt of things that we can use, but it's not as effective as reinforcement. It simply isn't. I'll give you a really good example. Speeding tickets. Now, speeding tickets, okay, there's a problem with speeding tickets. It is a variable ratio punishment is what it is, the fine, which it's a variable ratio negative punishment, meaning, let's say you're going to get caught and you got to pay a fine. You're going to lose money. That's variable ratio because, as you probably know yourself, most of the time you get away with it. It's actually the converse of a variable ratio negative negative punishment is actually a variable ratio positive reinforcement. I got the thrill of getting away with it. And I got there faster, or I perceive it was faster and things like that. So speeding is not it. It's not a good getting speeding tickets is a punishment that is ineffective. It doesn't really keep people from speeding. It doesn't keep the people who speed from speeding. Okay, which are there. Okay, punishment. The problem with punishment is that we can often do it in anger. It can be seeking revenge, and it can express power. These are the ways in which we negatively use. I use the word negative. The ways in which we use punishment inappropriately. However, the thing is, it works. It works in a way. If something's punishing, then they won't do it. The hand on the stove thing. It's one of those things. You can only go so far with that. It's not going to give them a fork and go find out what electrical circuits are all about. But that idea of punishment, that's ingrained in our society. Our criminal justice system is based on a punishment system, and it's a variable ratio punishment system. Not very effective, because the other side of a variable ratio punishment system is a variable ratio positive reinforcement. I'm getting away with it most of the time. And so that really doesn't work. It also makes people emotional. When we use punishment, it might make the person, our child or our partner or ourselves even, might make us angry and frustrated and sad. Maybe we'll feel worthless. Those kind of things. If it's fueled by anger, it can often go too far, and certainly in terms of physical abuse or taking away everything and just yelling and screaming and all those things that we think will stop the behavior. We tend to also be inconsistent in this because people will feel guilty or they give in after a while with the negative reinforcement loop and all that stuff. So we're inconsistent in doing this. And most importantly, when we talk about the differential reinforcement, it just tells you what not to do. It doesn't tell you what to do. Remember that A that has led you to this desire to act in a certain way. Someone takes that away because it's punishing. You still have that desire. You still have that A that is saying, I'm frustrated, I'm lost, I'm bored, I need stimulation, I just whatever. That's all still there. And when your go-to has punishment, results in punishment, what do? You have a behavior vacuum. Okay, positive punishment. That's spanking, that's yelling at somebody, giving them the look. All this, I mean, I'm making the real negative ones. Is that, ones that are the positive punishment, getting written up, getting um, getting reprimanded, any one of those things. We're adding something. Negative punishment is timeout. Okay, timeout. Probably one of the most effective ways in which we use punishment. Timeout is not when we send somebody to their room. Timeout is not isolation. Timeout is not social exclusion. It's not that. It may involve that. What we're doing when we're doing timeout is we're removing a reinforcer. Remember the negative reinforcer, we're removing an irritant. In negative punishment, timeout, we are removing a reinforcer. So I'll give you one from my own history. Again, my daughter Mara was playing Candyland. Now, Candyland has rules, and my daughter Mara was not yet at the age when these rules were, part of the game. And the older sister, Hannah, was playing by the rules. Now, the younger daughter needs to get the 2 purple squares in Candyland in order to pass her sister. She gets that, so she picks up the cards and starts looking for the one that she wants. That's against the rules. Flipped Hannah out, whatever. She's going against the rules. So I'm trying to, developmentally and, instructionally trying to get Mara to stop doing that and, adopt the rule kind of thing. And she started acting out and she, wiping out, took her piece and then wiped out Hannah's part, that all that stuff. So I said, I'm going to put you in timeout. So I took her chair and I pulled it about 3 feet from the table. And Hannah and I kept on playing while she was over there looking. And I will not claim, supreme parenting skills in any way. But that one worked really well. She was pulled away from the reinforcing thing. And then I told her what she needed to do to join the game again. Smooth sailing after that. So now we're left here with, at the end of all this, at the end of the text, there's this chart right here. Everything that I've talked about so far today. The reinforcements and punishments. Reinforcements increase, punishments decrease. Positive reinforcement, we add an appetite, an appetitive, that's a neat word, stimulus following a correct behavior treat. Then we have negative, we have escape, removing the noxious stimulus, or active avoidance, these ways in which we avoid the negative. These are negative reinforcers. And then over on the punishment side, we have positive, such as, the spanking a child or whatever. And then we have the negative one, which is basically timeout. They put sending them to their room. Don't think that that's a really good example because that actually might be a negative reinforcement loop. A child may act out in order to get sent to their room. And what we need to be able to do is to teach them, if they really want to go to their room and just simmer down and quiet down, we have to teach them ways to communicate that. So again, we get the skill development. This has been a lot. This has been a lot because it's important for us to understand, first and foremost, and I'll just go right back to the beginning, the stimulus or whatever it is that happens on the C is only a reinforcement if it effectively maintains or increases the behavior that precedes it. The C is a punishment only if it has the desired effect of reducing or eliminating the behavior that precedes it. That's the rule. So we're left with a discussion. Let's debate the use of punishment. When does it work? What I'm looking for is ways in which punishment worked. Not, we know it doesn't work, and we know it doesn't work as well as reinforcement. Let's see if collectively we can come up with some good examples of when punishment really worked. Secondly, in the quiz, I have some questions. The first, define the basic element of a stimulus that makes it a reinforcer. In clear and precise terms, differentiate between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. We've just been talking about that. And finally, in the third question, describe an example of any one of the differential reinforcement: differential alternative, differential incompatible, differential low frequency, and differential other, DRO. Any one of those described from your experience, or make one up. Make one up that you could possibly use. Okay? It has to be clear in all of these answers. Your goal is not to quickly answer the question. Your goal is to convince me in the way that you write your answers that you understand these concepts. So make sure that you get that piece in there. I trust you will all do well. Thank you for letting me entertain you for all this time. Probably the longest video I've ever done for a class for Monday videos. So enjoy this week, and I will see you online. Take care.